Yesterday, you judged someone, not after a conversation, not after getting to know them, just by looking. Maybe it was a stranger who walked past you, or someone sitting across from you on the train. Within moments, something inside you had already started answering questions you never consciously asked. Can I trust this person? Do they seem confident? Should I like them? The unsettling part? It didn't feel like a decision. It felt like the truth. But what if that feeling says less about the person in front of you and more about the shortcuts inside your own mind? In this video, we'll uncover 7 hidden signs that quietly shape every first impression you make, and why those judgments are often far less accurate than they feel. Once you see these patterns, you'll never meet a stranger the same way again. Sign 1. You trust certain faces instantly. Picture this. You're waiting in line for your morning coffee. Someone turns around for just a second. You've never spoken to them. You know nothing about their life. Yet almost instantly, a feeling appears. They seem trustworthy. Or maybe something about them feels off. The strange part? That feeling arrived before a single word was spoken, and it wasn't random. Psychologist Alexander Todorov found that people begin forming impressions of a face in as little as 1/10 of a second. Even when given more time to look, those first impressions often changed very little. But here's what most people never realize. Your brain isn't trying to discover who someone is. It's trying to predict whether they matter to you. Thousands of years ago, that shortcut helped our ancestors decide whether to approach a stranger or stay away. Today, the same instinct quietly judges coworkers, classmates, and people standing beside you in a coffee shop. Your first impression isn't seeing someone clearly. It's seeing someone quickly. And before your eyes have finished deciding, another part of your brain is already listening. Sign 2. You mistake behavior for personality. Imagine stepping into an elevator. Another person walks in just before the doors close. Neither of you says a word. Yet within seconds, you've already decided what kind of person they are. Confident, awkward, friendly, maybe even intelligent. The strange part? They've done almost nothing. Psychologist Nalini Ambady called this ability thin slicing. In one of her most famous studies, people watched just a few silent seconds of teachers they had never met. No conversation, no background, just body language and facial expressions. Their first impressions closely matched the opinions of students who had spent an entire semester with those same teachers. Your mind is remarkably good at spotting patterns, but patterns aren't proof. Sometimes confidence is mistaken for competence, and silence becomes a personality. The less your mind knows, the faster it fills in the blanks. And just when you think your eyes have made the decision, your ears quietly join the conversation. Sign 3. You hear more than words. The elevator doors open. For the first time, they speak. Good morning. Just 2 simple words. Yet before you've fully understood what they said, your brain has already reacted to how they said it. A calm voice feels reassuring. A warm tone feels welcoming. A hesitant voice can sound uncertain, even when the words never change. But here's the part most people never notice. Long before you evaluate someone's ideas, you're already responding to their delivery. Psychologists have found that tone, pitch, and rhythm influence the impressions we form, often before we consciously process the meaning of the words themselves. That's why you've probably caught yourself thinking, I don't know why, but I liked them the moment they started talking. Or perhaps, something about their voice just didn't feel right. We rarely hear a voice exactly as it is. We hear what it makes us feel. And before the conversation is even over, one final detail quietly begins shaping everything else you believe. Sign 4. You mistake presence for confidence. Walk into any meeting, and before anyone introduces themselves, one person quietly stands out. Not because they're speaking the most, not because they've proved anything, simply because they look comfortable. Relaxed posture, steady eye contact, calm movements. Without realizing it, your brain begins making another assumption. They must know what they're doing. But here's the catch. Confidence is easy to notice. Competence isn't. Research in social psychology has consistently shown that people often associate confident behavior with intelligence, leadership, and ability, even when they have little evidence to support those conclusions. That's because certainty feels convincing. But feeling convinced isn't the same as being correct. Confidence can open the door to trust, even when it hasn't earned the key. And once one quality stands out, your brain quietly lets that single impression shape everything else it believes. Sign 5. One good impression makes you ignore everything else. You're scrolling through social media. A profile catches your attention. The photos look polished. The smile feels genuine. Everything seems effortlessly put together. And almost without noticing, your brain begins filling in the blanks. They must be kind. They probably work hard. They seem trustworthy. But here's what most people never realize. One positive quality has a strange way of influencing everything else we believe about someone. Psychologists call this the halo effect. Our tendency to let one favorable impression shape how we judge a person's other qualities, even when we have no evidence those qualities are connected. An attractive person suddenly seems more trustworthy. A confident person appears more capable. A successful person feels more intelligent, not because you've discovered who they really are, but because your brain prefers one simple explanation over many unanswered questions. One good impression can quietly outweigh 100 unknowns, and sometimes the strongest feeling of trust has nothing to do with the other person. It begins with something familiar inside you. Sign 6. You trust people who remind you of yourself. You're talking to someone for the first time. Then they mention something unexpected. They grew up in a town near yours. They love the same music. Maybe they even laugh at the same kind of jokes. Almost instantly, the conversation feels easier. The silence feels lighter, and trust begins to grow. But here's the surprising part. Nothing important has actually changed. You still don't know their values, their character, or how they'll treat you over time. Psychologists call this the Similarity-Attraction Effect, our natural tendency to feel more comfortable with people who remind us of ourselves, whether through shared interests, experiences, or beliefs. That feeling of familiarity creates a quiet sense of safety. But familiarity isn't proof of compatibility, and it certainly isn't proof of character. Sometimes the strongest feeling of trust begins with something familiar, not something true. And once your brain starts believing that story, it begins searching for reasons to prove itself right. Sign 7. You stop looking for the truth. Think back to the person you've been meeting throughout this video. First, you noticed their face, then their behavior. You heard their voice. You saw their confidence. You formed an impression. You found something familiar. By now, your brain has already built a story. And here's the problem. Once that story exists, your attention quietly begins looking for evidence that supports it. Psychologists call this confirmation bias, our natural tendency to notice information that agrees with what we already believe, while overlooking information that challenges those beliefs. If you decide someone is kind, their kindness stands out. If you decide they're arrogant, their confidence suddenly feels like proof. The person hasn't changed. Only your interpretation has. The hardest judgment to change isn't your first impression. It's the belief you built from it. The next time you meet someone, pause before deciding who they are. Because your first impression introduces a stranger. Only time introduces the person. The next time you meet someone, pay attention to your very first impression. Notice how quickly your mind begins filling in the blanks, not because those instincts are always wrong, but because they're rarely the whole story. The The people who change our lives aren't always the ones who make the best first impression. Sometimes, they're the ones we almost misunderstood. Your first impression introduces a stranger. Time is what introduces the person. If this documentary changed the way you'll see the next person you meet, consider subscribing to Psychology Rationalized, because every week we explore the hidden patterns that quietly shape the way we think, feel, and connect with one another.